I am your Grandpa Paul, and this is my story, The Horned Rat. Sweat dripped from Derek's forehead because of a whole day's farm work. This was the only means of livelihood for his family. The pay was small, but with so many bills to settle, Derek had to endure it. He couldn't find any other job anyway. He only finished elementary school. He envied his siblings who were already living comfortable lives while he had to bear the heat in the middle of his break time. Their boss, Stephen, happened to pass by. He was the owner of acres upon acres of farmland in their small town. "So Derek, are you just going to sit there? It's still work time. Must be nice, huh?" Stephen called out, seeing Derek leaning against a fallen tree trunk. "Oh, I just sat down a moment ago." "I'm sorry," Derek replied apologetically. "I don't care how long you've been there. All I'm saying is, don't be lazy if you're on the clock. Look at your co-workers. Are they resting? See, that's why your life never gets better," Stephen declared loudly, enough for the other workers to hear. Derek felt humiliated, as though he wanted the ground to swallow him up. He couldn't do anything but bow his head. He could only let his boss speak all those hurtful words. It was a bitter pill to swallow for someone who hadn't finished school. The arrogant Stephen walked away. Derek just clenched his fist, seething inside. "One day, you'll regret looking down on me," he muttered under his breath, eyes burning with anger. The sad part was, he couldn't fight back. He couldn't afford to lose this job, the family's only source of income. He simply went back to work, ignoring his co-workers who were whispering and making him their topic of conversation. Later that evening, he reached home at 9 o'clock. That wasn't his usual time. He had been asked to clear out weeds that had invaded their cornfield. Exhausted, Derek sat by their doorstep, lost in thought. He noticed a rat scurrying around the yard. "Perfect. There's nothing else for me to eat tonight, but this would be food for my wife and kid," Derek said, briefly glancing at the small bag of noodles in his hand. He placed the bag on an old chair and quietly approached the rat, but just before he could catch it, the rat ran off. Derek let out a frustrated breath. He was disappointed the rat escaped. He had planned to make it his dinner that night. "Hon, what are you doing?" asked Pamela, Derek's wife, as she stood at the door. "Huh? Oh, nothing. I was just shooing a rat away," Derek answered quickly. He didn't want his wife to know that he was planning to eat a field rat. He didn't want her feeling sorry for him. After a while, his wife and child ate dinner. Derek excused himself, saying he was heading back to the farm. He couldn't think of any other way to ease his hunger. A field rat was the only thing he believed could fill him up enough to sleep without hunger pains. Holding a flashlight, he inspected every row of plants he passed. Rats were quick, so he moved slowly. "Come on, even just one. I just want something to eat. I can't work tomorrow on an empty stomach," he whispered to himself. A few minutes later, he spotted a rat contentedly munching on some corn. Derek quickly readied a small pail he carried. "Gotcha, furball!" He slammed the pail down over the rat. A grin spread across his face. That one rat felt like a blessing, a free meal for Derek. "Great, I'll grill you tonight," he said, stopping mid-sentence when he noticed another rat. However, this one was different. In all his life, he had never seen a rat with horns. Derek shone his flashlight on it and noticed it was eating a lizard. Derek was stunned. He never expected a rat to eat a lizard. "Wait, is that really a rat?" The creature looked at Derek, its eyes seemingly glowing red. Derek grew more interested in capturing it, but it suddenly took off. Derek shook his head and let it go. He had his meal for the night. "Well, time to go home," he sighed. On his way, he spotted his boss Stephen on the roadside, leaning against a black car. Derek stopped to see what Stephen could be doing there at such an hour. "That's not his wife," Derek muttered, noticing a woman stepping out of the car and kissing his boss. He watched them kiss for about 5 minutes. At that moment, a devious thought entered Derek's mind. "You'd better watch out. We'll see if Mrs. April won't leave you once she finds out what you're doing," Derek whispered with a grin. He headed back to his house. Despite the late hour, he grilled the field rat for dinner. The next day, Derek woke up early for work. The moment he stepped out into his yard, he saw a crowd of people gathered at a house just a few yards away. "Now what's going on over there? Looks like a bunch of gossips again," Derek muttered. As he got closer, he saw that their neighbor's dog had died. "Hey, what happened?" Derek asked his friend Robert, who was also there to see. "They say some animal attacked it," Robert answered. "Some animal? What animal?" Derek pressed. "Go ask the owner, Derek." "I don't know either," Robert replied. Derek just shook his head and went on to the farm. Upon arrival, he saw his boss, Stephen, waiting. The moment Derek approached, Stephen slapped him. It wasn't that hard, but it jolted Derek's head to one side. "What time is it?" Stephen demanded. 6 o'clock, Derek answered, head bowed. "Yeah, 6. Didn't I tell you yesterday to come extra early to help haul our harvest?" Derek's eyes widened, having forgotten what Stephen asked. "I'm sorry, I forgot," he said, feeling embarrassed. "Ugh, you really are hopeless. You know, your wife's lucky she can put up with your stupidity. Now get to work." Derek's anger flared inside him again. He still couldn't understand why, among all the laborers, he was the only one his boss constantly picked on. He clenched his fist and promised himself that someday he'd get back at Stephen for every humiliation. They worked until break time. Derek, as usual, had no food with him, so he stayed behind in the fields, deciding he might as well finish some tasks to get home earlier. While busy working, he noticed something moving behind a row of pineapples. He walked over cautiously and saw a horned rat. "Hey, it's you," Derek said. It looked at him as if it understood. Derek was about to catch it, but was shocked when the rat itself jumped onto his chest and clung there so firmly he couldn't toss it away. After a few moments, Derek realized it wasn't hurting him. When he looked down, he saw that the rat's eyes were closed. Derek relaxed. Maybe it was just a regular field rat, gentle and not prone to biting. "Wow, with you being this cuddly, I can't possibly grill you," Derek joked. He let the rat stay on his chest while he went back to work. It only jumped away when his co-workers returned. Derek felt a strange fondness for it. He'd never encountered such a creature. A rat that seemed to have its own mind, almost like it wanted to befriend him. The only thing that puzzled Derek was why it had horns. "Are you sure you want to stay here and keep planting? You can put it off till tomorrow," said Glenn, one of Derek's co-workers. Of all the men in the fields, Glenn was the only one Derek got along with. "I'm good. I'll finish everything now so maybe Boss Stephen will be pleased," Derek answered. "All right, it's just that I'm worried about you. You have no proper meal and you're tired. Well, I'm heading out. Take care," Glenn said, patting Derek's back before leaving. Derek poured his energy into planting seeds in an empty patch of soil. He surveyed it first, figuring out how to plant new seeds. He hadn't even started when he heard a rat squeaking and felt something crawling up his leg, heading for his shoulder. "Go on, get off me. I'm working," he said. But the rat just stared at him and wouldn't leave, so Derek kept working with the rat perched on him. By late afternoon, he finished. He decided to take the rat home, placing it in an old chicken coop from hens they'd already butchered. "Stay in there, okay? I'll give you food tomorrow, but you can't let my kid see you or he'll think you're some toy," Derek mumbled, feeling a bit silly for talking to a rat. Before he left, he touched the rat's tiny horns, barely an inch long. "You're really something else?" he remarked. The next morning, shouts rang out from the street. "Oh my God, what happened to Todd's goats? Did a monster attack them? Poor goats," Derek heard these cries through the window, which woke him up. He saw nosy neighbors gathered at Todd's house. "What's going on now? It's so early. This is annoying," he complained. Pamela, who was making his coffee, answered. "Todd's goats died, apparently. People are saying some monster did it." "A monster? That's ridiculous. If it's real, why wouldn't it go after Todd's pregnant wife? Why the goats? Are the goats pregnant too?" Derek retorted sarcastically, making Pamela stifle a laugh. He grabbed his coffee and stepped outside to see a commotion. He spotted the two lifeless goats, one missing its legs, the other with a hole in its stomach as wide as a cup. Derek started to leave, but then remembered his horned rat. He went around back and was surprised to find the rat now the size of a cat. Its horns had grown longer too. "What happened to you?" Derek asked, noticing blood around the rat's mouth. Immediately, he put two and two together. "Hold on, don't tell me." He glanced toward Todd's yard, where people were still buzzing. "So you're the one who killed the goats? What are you really?" He was fascinated now. More than ever, the rat's special nature was apparent. "I get it. You grow bigger each time you eat another animal," Derek murmured, a grin forming on his face as he thought of something devious, something that might let him get back at Stephen. "Go to my boss Stephen's house, eat his 2 prized chickens," Derek whispered, sounding half crazed. If anyone saw him talking like that, they'd think he'd lost his mind. "Come on, if you're really special, do what I say tonight," he added. The rat only stared back at him with glowing red eyes. Derek didn't go to work that day. It was his rest day since he'd finished tasks early. He spent the morning thinking about that remarkable rat, excited over the possibility that it truly possessed strange powers. That evening, Derek opened the coop. The rat came out and left immediately. "All right, do what I asked. I'm gonna go have a drink first," Derek said. He told Pamela he was heading out, and she agreed. He went to Glenn's place. They had planned to drink that night. By the time Derek arrived, Glenn was just about done setting up. "Perfect timing, just push the gate open," Glenn called. Derek shoved aside the old wooden gate. "Sorry, man, I didn't bring any snacks or anything," Derek said sheepishly. Glenn patted his shoulder. "Hey, don't worry about it. I'm the one who invited you, right? I just want someone to talk to. Honestly, out of everyone at the farm, you're the only one who understands me. The rest are, let's just say, not very bright," Glenn said. "That's a bit harsh. Maybe call them clueless instead," Derek joked, and they both laughed. "By the way, man, did you know our boss Stephen has another woman?" Glenn asked, making Derek sit up. "What? How do you know?" he asked in return. "I've known for a while. I once saw him pick up some woman in his car. Poor Mrs. April. She's beautiful and he's cheating on her," Glenn replied. "Ugh, that jerk boss of ours. If I were that kind of person, I'd snitch on him to Mrs. April," Derek said. "Oh, don't. Let her figure it out. Poor boss, if she finds out, though, she might go nuts," Glenn remarked. "Huh? What do you mean?" Derek asked, taking a swig of whiskey. "Haven't you heard the rumors? People say Mrs. April's family is a bit unstable. Supposedly they have mental issues," Glenn explained. "You believe that?" "Come on," Derek said, though he chuckled. "Why not? My uncle knows some of her relatives. They're all off their rocker, especially if they get mad. For all we know, Mrs. April could be the same way." "She might kill our boss," Glenn added. "Well, that'd serve him right," Derek replied, bitterness in his voice. Glenn patted Derek's shoulder. "Derek, no matter how rough life gets, don't ever become like them. We have to try to be good at all times," Glenn said. Derek kept silent. He didn't agree. He believed that weak people stayed good because they had no choice. They continued drinking until they finished a bottle of whiskey. Derek decided to head home. "All right, man, thanks. You're the best," Derek said. "Don't mention it. Be careful on your way back. You might trip, Glenn told him. Derek waved as he left. While walking home, Derek remembered the horned rat. He recalled the instructions he'd given it, so he turned left toward Stephen's house, curious to see if anything had happened. Within minutes, Derek stood outside his boss's enormous home. Jealousy swelled in him. He had always dreamed of a house this big and beautiful. He peered inside, but saw no one, so he went to where the chickens were kept. He was disappointed to see them all still alive, with no sign of the horned rat. So it was all just nonsense, he muttered. He was about to leave when the horned rat appeared. Derek's eyes widened, bracing himself for what might happen next. "I thought you weren't coming," he whispered. "Go on, devour them all. Those are expensive birds," he added under his breath. Moments later, the rat grabbed one chicken's leg from inside the coop. Not satisfied, it bit and tore at the coop's wooden frame. Derek was alarmed at how easily the rat destroyed it. The rat tore into the chicken, making Derek's hair stand on end. He turned away, unable to watch. The rat continued mauling the remaining chickens. Hearing Stephen's car outside, Derek ran off, his earlier buzz evaporating in a rush of panic. He hadn't realized how vicious the rat could be. For Derek, the rat was no longer just a strange creature. It was practically a monster or a demon. Gasping for breath, Derek finally reached home. He couldn't shake off the memory of what he had witnessed. Fear crept over him, knowing that the horned rat might pose a threat to his own family. He lay awake until morning, mind churning with worry about the rat's possible return. At sunrise, Derek jolted up at the sound of Glenn calling outside. "Hon, Glenn's here looking for you. Are you heading to work?" Pamela asked. Derek went out to face his friend. "Man, maybe stay home today. Boss Stephen's in a rage at the farm, taking it out on everyone," Glenn said. "Huh? Why? What happened?" Derek asked, pretending ignorance. "Something or someone slaughtered all his prized chickens at his house. They were completely torn apart. Think it was a monster again?" Glenn replied. Derek and Pamela exchanged nervous glances. He tried to hide his unease. "I don't know, man. I don't know anything," Derek answered. That morning, he stayed home, following Glenn's advice. He waited for the rat to return, but it never did. By evening, Derek left the house. It was only 7, but the streets were already deserted because of rumors about a monster roaming the neighborhood. Derek shook his head. He knew all the talk stemmed from the horned rat's attacks on livestock. He walked on, intending to go to Glenn's place to borrow some money, when suddenly he heard a familiar noise coming from a cluster of shrubs. He turned to look. From the darkness emerged the horned rat, now as tall as a large dog, with a body as broad as a turtle. Its movements were slower but more menacing, with fangs jutting out. It paused, staring at Derek, who backed away until he was pressed against a neighbor's fence. The rat did nothing to him. It simply walked on until it disappeared from view. Derek ran home, heart pounding. He slammed the door and windows shut. Pamela gave him a confused look. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. "Pamela, promise me you won't go outside. That horned rat is out there," Derek pleaded. She furrowed her brow, unsure what he was talking about. "Huh? What are you saying, Derek? What horned rat?" Derek kept insisting. "There's a horned rat out there. The same monster that's been killing pets around our neighborhood. It's huge now. It might attack people next." He was starting to sound crazy to his wife, Pamela, who watched him pace anxiously. Any little noise made Derek jump, thinking it might be the rat. "Derek, what are you even talking about? This isn't funny anymore," Pamela scolded. "You're scaring our child. I'm telling you, just don't go outside, not until I say it's safe," Derek insisted. He was about to continue when they heard a scream from the house across the street. A few moments later, peeking through the window, they saw neighbors gathered outside Todd's home. Derek grabbed a machete from behind the door and ran toward the commotion. "What's going on?" he asked. "Derek, don't go in there," a panicked man replied. "There's some kind of monster inside." But Derek didn't listen. Determined to protect his family, he vaulted over Todd's fence. Inside, he heard Todd yelling, "Let go of my wife!" Suddenly, Todd came hurtling through the front door, as if thrown by something powerful. Derek peered inside and saw a hairy, man-shaped figure, but its head was that of a rat, complete with 2 long horns. Horrified, Derek watched as it gripped Todd's pregnant wife, Josephine. She was unconscious, covered in blood, and her belly had been torn open. Despite his terror, Derek charged toward the rat man. "I'll kill you!" he shouted, swinging the machete. The creature dodged swiftly and ran for the window, leaping out and vanishing into the night. Word of the horned rat man spread quickly. Everyone believed it was some kind of shape-shifting demon lurking in their town. To be certain, the community leader consulted a well-known spiritual healer named Frank, who traveled from a nearby county. Residents who had witnessed the attacks, especially Todd, who had just lost his wife, gathered at the community center, and Derek stood off to the side, listening to the healer's words. Frank declared the creature was indeed a demonic shapeshifter, but he couldn't identify its exact nature. "I've never heard of a case where such a creature has horns," he told the crowd. "Listen carefully. Hang garlic and sprinkle salt at your doors so it can't enter. If you have children, protect them with something made of lead. Anything you can find, as it's believed to repel evil. And don't be afraid. Creatures like this feed on fear. They grow bolder if they sense it." "I knew it was a demon," someone murmured. Just then, Glenn showed up beside Derek, nearly making him jump. "Hey, you startled me," Derek muttered. "Man, I'm sure this demon is the same one that killed our boss Steven's chickens," Glenn remarked. "But is it really a horned rat the size of a dog?" He couldn't help but chuckle in disbelief. "It's true," Derek said. "I saw it myself." "Anyway, Derek, let's head to the fields for work. It's only 7 in the morning, so we can still make it on time. Come on, we'll go together," Glenn said, patting Derek on the shoulder. "Yeah, okay," Derek replied. He hurried home to get ready, finding Pamela finishing his coffee. "Here," she said, "drink this before you go so you'll warm up a bit." "Thanks," Derek said, taking the cup from the table. "What happened at the community center?" she asked. The healer confirmed it's a demon. It hunts kids, pregnant women, and livestock. So keep an eye on our child. You remember what happened to Josephine? Derek shook his head, still haunted by the sight. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first," Pamela sighed. "It's all right. Even I could hardly believe it. The rat was small when I first saw it. Just a regular rat, but with horns. Then it ate Todd's goat and got bigger. It ate Steven's chickens, then became as tall as a dog," Derek explained. "Why didn't you tell the authorities right away? Maybe they could have done something." "Because I didn't think it would go this far. Besides, it seemed to know what I was doing. It was following me around. I never imagined it was a demon, though." Derek let out a deep breath. He was worried for his family's safety, knowing this shape-shifting rat likely understood where he lived. A little while later, Derek left for work. He was out of luck that morning. His boss, Steven, was there, waiting. As soon as Derek arrived, Steven stormed over and slapped him, not hard, but enough to jerk Derek's head to one side. "You're late again. Who do you think you are, the boss here?" Steven snapped. "I'm sorry," Derek mumbled. "Sorry? Maybe I should just fire you. Or do you want me to beat your face in? You worthless jerk. You're lucky I don't go after your wife," Steven snarled. Hearing his wife insulted made Derek's blood boil. In that moment, he lost control. "You've got some nerve. Did I ever drag Mrs. April into our problems? You're out of line. You think I'll just let this slide forever? I'm done." In a flash, Derek punched Stephen, knocking him into the mud. He wasn't finished either. Derek stomped on Stephen's head, forcing him face down into the dirt. "You might have money, but you don't own me," Derek fumed. "I've endured your garbage for too long. You can kill me if you want. I've got nothing to lose. But if I kill you, there's plenty your family will lose." Glenn rushed over, grabbing Derek. "Calm down, man. That's enough. Look at our boss's face," Glenn pleaded, trying to pull Derek away. Derek finally relented and walked off. When Pamela heard what had happened, she was crestfallen. "Are you kidding me, Derek? Why'd you have to do that to your boss? How are we supposed to earn a living now? We've got bills, a kid. What's the plan?" "He disrespected you right in front of me, Pamela. What else was I supposed to do? Just stand there?" Derek shot back. "I couldn't care less what he said to me, but I do care about our survival. You don't?" "I do care. What you don't get is I won't let anyone insult you. Let them insult me all day. I can take it, but never you." Pamela just shook her head. "Fine. I'm still finding a job, whether you stop me or not. We can't both be unemployed. How will we eat?" She headed out the door, leaving Derek alone, still trembling with rage. 3 days passed without any sign of the horned, shape-shifting rat. People relaxed, assuming the creature had moved on from their town. Meanwhile, Derek stayed at home doing nothing, since he no longer had work. He looked after their child while Pamela did laundry for the neighbors. The pay was minimal, but at least they had enough to eat come dinner. By 8 o'clock one evening, Pamela still wasn't home, and Derek started to worry. It was late, and he feared she might become the demon rat's next victim. He left his child in the house, locking the doors and windows, then set out to find her. The streets were empty. Derek walked for blocks without seeing a soul. Once or twice, he heard footsteps crunching on dry leaves behind him. He glanced back, but saw only darkness. A shiver ran down his spine. He felt sure the horned rat was nearby, stalking him. But he pressed on. After almost an hour, he decided to head back, believing Pamela might have already returned. When he reached their home, he found her sitting on the doorstep, staring blankly ahead. She had a scrape on her arm, her clothes were torn, and she smelled of alcohol. "What happened?" Derek asked, heart pounding. Pamela said nothing at first. She just burst into tears. A heavy dread settled in Derek's chest. "Tell me," he pleaded. "I was doing laundry at your boss's place for Mrs. April, but when she left, Stephen, he..." Pamela's voice cracked. Derek felt his entire world collapse, overtaken by rage and hate. There was no doubt now. He would find a way to make Stephen pay for what he had done. He soothed Pamela as best he could, and after half an hour of crying, she finally fell asleep. "You're going to pay for this, Stephen," Derek snarled under his breath. He stormed out of the house. As he turned the corner, he spotted the horned rat lurking among the bushes, making low, chittering sounds. Derek had a feeling the creature was trying to communicate with him, but he was too consumed by his own plan. He marched straight to Stephen and April's home. Stephen's car was just pulling away, perfect timing for Derek to do what he intended. He slipped through the gate, crept inside the living room, and heard April screaming upstairs. He dashed toward the bedroom, stopping short at the sight of the rat-like demon standing before April. Its body was covered in thick fur, its head still that of a horned rat. April wailed and begged for help, but in the blink of an eye, the creature lunged at her. The bedroom filled with her screams as it tore her apart, blood spraying the walls, bed, and floor. Derek stood there, trembling, watching the monstrosity devour Stephen's wife. Though he despised Stephen, he had never once thought to harm April. Yet part of him grinned, a hint of madness in his eyes. He felt as if, in a twisted way, he was finally getting revenge on Stephen. 15 minutes later, April's mangled body lay in pieces. The demon thing turned to face Derek, who braced himself, certain he'd be the next victim. Then, shockingly, the creature spoke.
"What do you command, Master?"
Derek couldn't believe it. In that instant, he understood. "I'm your master. You'll do everything I say." The beast merely nodded. A triumphant smirk crossed Derek's face. He felt no remorse for the gruesome fate of April. All he felt was the rush of vengeance. "Kill Stephen's entire family," Derek hissed. "Wipe them out. I want him to know what it feels like to lose everyone." Satisfied with his order, Derek hurried back to his own house, pretending nothing had happened. Pamela was puzzled as to why he didn't report Stephen's crime to the authorities, but Derek wouldn't say a word. The next day, screams again tore through the neighborhood. April's dismembered body had been discovered. Everyone immediately assumed it was the same shape-shifting demon. A crowd gathered, crying out in alarm. Derek stood on the edge of it, secretly smirking as Stephen wailed over his wife's body, utterly clueless about Derek's involvement. "Oh my God, that monster again," people murmured, trembling. "What do we do now? It's picking us off one by one." Derek was about to leave when Glenn appeared. "Another victim, huh? So brutal," Glenn remarked, putting an arm around Derek's shoulders. "Good enough for Stephen," Derek said. "He's so cruel. I hope now he knows how valuable April really was." Eventually, everyone dispersed after the body was removed. Stephen nearly lost his mind with grief, but he had no idea Derek had orchestrated everything. Night fell. Derek sipped coffee by his front door, while Pamela sat inside, still in a daze. Derek, lost in his thirst for revenge, paid her little attention. Suddenly, he noticed people running and shouting. Curious, he asked one of them, "Hey, what's going on?" "Oh, Derek, there's been another attack by that demon. Stephen's entire family. My God, they were slaughtered." Unable to contain himself, Derek actually felt happy. He grinned from ear to ear. Finally, Stephen was suffering as he once had. Derek failed to notice Pamela standing behind him, puzzled and horrified by his reaction. "Derek," she said quietly, "tell me why you're smiling at this tragedy. Why are you so happy about what's happening to Stephen's family?" "Isn't it obvious, Pamela?" "He's getting what he deserves," Derek replied. She shook her head in disbelief. "This isn't the kind of justice I wanted. I wanted the law to handle him, not this. I don't even recognize you anymore. You look like a demon yourself with that smile." She retreated inside, disturbed by the darkness she saw in him. Derek didn't care what Pamela thought. He was focused only on Stephen's misery. He decided to head to the home of Stephen's relatives, eager to see for himself the chaos unfolding. When he arrived, a crowd had already gathered. "Pretty sad sight, huh?" said a familiar voice behind him. Derek turned to see Robert, an old childhood friend. "Robert, what are you doing here?" Derek asked, surprised. Robert's smile was unsettling. "I came to join you, so we can watch the downfall of the man who made your life miserable," he said. Derek raised an eyebrow, confused. He had never shared these troubles with Robert. That was something he usually only talked about with Glenn. "When do we go after Stephen himself?" Robert continued. "Isn't that what you want, Master?" "What did you say?" Derek asked, startled. Robert just smirked. "Yes, Derek, you've guessed it," he replied. Then he flashed a vicious grin. Stunned, Derek watched Robert walk away. He had no idea why Robert was suddenly helping him, nor did he know how his friend had turned into a creature like that. A chill ran down Derek's spine, but at the same time, he smiled at the thought that before long, Stephen would be the next one under a black shroud, his body parts scattered in pieces. The end. This was Mr. Horror. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, drop a comment below. I'll see you in the next horror story.